Is Israel guilty of ethnic cleansing? I'm seeing a lot of news outlets and people say that Israel is guilty of genocide and that Hamas's attack on Israel was justified. So I want to play a clip from CNN so that you can see what I'm talking about. And then I want you to hear from Robert Spencer. He's the author of the Palestinian Delusion, and he is an expert on the conflict between Israel and Palestine.
Even when the world isn't watching, especially when the world isn't watching, Palestinian villages are bombed, homes are demolished or taken, journalists are killed, protesters are executed. Under these conditions of ethnic cleansing, international law, human nature, and just basic common sense all suggest that resistance is both reasonable and necessary. Now, that said, violent resistance has never been the first step. Palestinians have always made efforts toward nonviolent solutions. Every Palestinian attempt, though, at nonviolent resistance, from peaceful protests to BDS to literature festivals, they've all been met with criminalization, violence, or public smearing campaigns. Even when Hamas hasn't recognized Israel, and that's true, other groups like the PLO and Fatah have absolutely done so. And still, Israel has refused to engage in reasonable, good faith negotiations. And more recently, they have refused to negotiate with Palestinians at all.
This makes me wonder if Marc Lamont Hill has any knowledge of the history of the last 100 years. This is really an appalling level of twisting of the historical facts. In 1947, the United Nations offered to partition what was left of the mandate for Palestine, which was supposed to be for the Jewish national home, and create a Jewish state and an Arab state, yet another Arab state. There were already 22 Arab countries, but that was not good enough. They had to have 23. And yet they rejected that. The Jews said, yeah, sure, we'll take that. And they took the little bit, the sliver of the original mandate that was left, and they made Israel there. The Arabs rejected a Palestinian state in 1948. Then in 1967, the offer was made again after the Six-Day War. In the 70s, at the Camp David Accords. In the 90s, at the Oslo Accords. In the 2000s, there was an offer made by the Prime Minister of Israel for everything that the Palestinians were demanding. It was like 99% of the territorial demands they were making, plus extra for the 1%. The Prime Minister offered them compensation in other areas for the 1% that he didn't want to give. They rejected that. The idea that the Palestinians have wanted to make peace and the Israelis have rejected it is completely ahistorical. It's just the other way around. And when it comes to nonviolent initiatives, the idea that the Israelis have crushed nonviolent initiatives and are oppressing the Palestinians is likewise completely false. The fact is that when he brushes by it real quick, he says, Hamas, yes, has not recognized Israel, but Fatah has, and the others have. Fatah has never recognized Israel as a Jewish state. It's recognized the existence of the state of Israel, but left open the possibility of it being overwhelmed by Arab Muslims who would transform it into an Islamic state. Has never recognized the right of a Jewish state to exist on that land. And Hamas just wants to destroy it utterly. Fatah does too, really, if you read between the lines. So the idea of Israel being able to live with that, it seems to me to be ridiculous. It's made the completely reasonable request that if we're going to make a framework for peace that's supposed to be a two-state solution in which we coexist peacefully with one another, then you have to recognize that we have a right to exist and be here. Otherwise, it's just a hollow assurance, and ultimately you're going to use the new state the way Gaza has been used, as a new jihad base to launch attacks against Israel. And that's the other thing he says, that Gaza keeps getting bombed and buildings blown up and so on. This is not some gratuitous action that happens out of the blue while the Gazans are picking daisies and singing folk songs, and then suddenly the Israelis bomb the place. This is a reaction to the fact that Gaza keeps sending rockets aimed at Israeli civilians, and keeps and the rhetoric, the hair-raising genocidal rhetoric that has been recognized in Palestinian textbooks again and again and again. Children of the youngest ages are taught to hate Jews, to want to kill Jews, to think that it's a noble thing to go on jihad and kill Jews. And then it erupts into violence. The Israelis retaliate. Mark Lamont Hill is pretending as if these retaliations are gratuitous, out of the blue, and are in response to nothing. Anybody who's been following what really happens there knows that's not true.
People claim that Israel is guilty of war crimes, but the thing that many people fail to realize is that Hamas uses civilian areas to mount attacks. Even the UN, which is a deeply anti-Israel organization, has recognized that Hamas uses civilian areas to mount attacks because they know that any act of retaliation will result in the loss of civilian life. So they put rocket launchers in schoolyards where they launch rockets from. And then when Israel takes out the rocket launcher, they report that Israel bombed a school. And the press runs with the story without doing any sort of investigation as to why it was bombed. You know, of course, it's awful to hear and to see the stories of all the children that have been killed so far in this war. But you need to understand that Hamas is intentionally doing this to their own people. They intentionally put their own civilians in harm's way. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section below. I can't wait to read them, and thanks for watching.